And here we are. Welcome back to the Richard Sophomore, where we never sit out. We're your hosts, MD and CD. CD, what is going on? The postseason, the offseason, it goes on. It's going crazy. Coaching carousel just picked up again a second wind. A second wind, we say? We're going to talk about some of that and some transfer portal players today. Thank you guys so much for the support in these last couple weeks, months. I mean, it's crazy. But you know the rule. If you like the content, like the video, and of course, consider subscribing. Please, please, if you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing. We would appreciate that very much. CD, what is going on?
Nothing much. I mean, we've so much has happened since we've been with you guys last. Obviously, Nick Saban haven't really been able to talk and meet about him as much as we would have liked to. But wow, what? First of all, what a legend! Retiring the sport's going to be different forever. The sport has been different for a week. It's been just about a week since when we're recording this Wednesday night. Since the news has broken. I mean, you can't say enough good things about Saban and what he did for the sport and what he means to it and people personally and professionally. Everything is done for all the players and families and the community of Alabama, the school, and obviously college football in general. Would love to see him continue to work in the sport, whatever it will be. Obviously, we're gonna miss him a ton. Roaming the sidelines, getting angry, breaking headsets, all that good stuff that he does. But yeah, happy for him and his family to really enjoy maybe the summer, go travel, do other things that you can't do as a college football head coach in 2024.
Miss Terry, I believe, is very happy. You have to believe that Miss Terry is very happy.
Yeah, she loves the school and she would have supported Saban no matter what. She loved being a part of, like, she was a big part of that Alabama program. Obviously not X's and O stuff, but relationship wise, and obviously supporting Saban, but also like meeting with players and families and recruiting and all that good stuff. But I'm sure she's happy. More Saban time, more travel time, all the good stuff she's been waiting to do while she's been supporting Saban, obviously. But we love Miss Terry. Miss Terry is the GOAT. She'll have a statue in Bryant Denny hopefully someday, as she should.
Exactly. Look, and this has had it'll have a greater ripple effect beyond just, the coaching changes that are going on because of this. But the reality is, so I had a list of graphics, right, that I had made for every single head coaching hire, right, for every single one.
We thought we were done.
I thought I was done. I thought I was done. And then I think it was 19 was the number. Maybe it was a little bit more than that. I'm not sure exactly. I thought I was done. Then all of a sudden, six more head coaching spots have opened as a result of this. Six. Six. We're talking Alabama, right? Of course, because Nick Saban retired. And then that trickled to Washington, right? Which trickled Arizona, which trickled to San Jose State. And then all of a sudden, Kalen DeBoer will get into a staff, hires away two head coaches of his own for his staff. So, I mean, just nuts stuff going on. Nuts stuff going on. So we're going to make sure to get into that today. We're going to get more coaches and even more players in future episodes. So please stay tuned for those if you guys want to hear about those. And if you guys have any Alabama fans, if you have any New Mexico State fans, if you have any Troy fans that are friends, make sure to send these videos to them because we're going to go pretty in depth here. I think more so than a lot of other people will. So we thank you guys so much. CD, are you ready to get into it?
Yep.
The first one. We have to get it out of the way. Let's talk Kalen DeBoer, right? Kalen DeBoer, if you don't know who he is, you should know who he is at this point. Now he's basically at the epicenter of college football right now as the head coach at Alabama. He was with Washington, where he made the college football playoffs, went 25-3, yada, 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 led two top five offenses, whatever. He was also at Fresno State, where he went 12-6. He was pretty good there. At Indiana, he was the offensive coordinator there he was a coordinator alongside another player or another person who happens to be on a staff as well, and we'll get to that. Eastern Michigan offensive coordinator. He was also Southern Illinois offensive coordinator, and at Sioux Falls, where it all started for this guy, his alma mater, went 67-3 as a head coach. So all time, This guy's 104-12 as a head coach, and in the postseason, he is 20-4. That is absurd. The guy wins, right? The guy wins.
Yeah,
As
and
Bear,
that's what you want.
as the famous Bama coach always said, Barry Bryant, I ain't never been nothing but a winner. Looks like you're trying to keep the train going. So what are
Let's
your
get into more. And
thoughts?
I give them a ton of credit. Greg Byrne had an impossible task. And that coaching search was about as, you know, public as you have, even though everything was happening behind closed doors and nobody really knew a ton of stuff, except obviously the man, Jimmy Sexton, which Matthew put out a great YouTube short on for him. Go check out our channel for that. But yeah, what he did is, first of all, he had to replace a GOAT with a limited, um, I wouldn't say limited check, but in terms of having to pay off some of these crazy buyouts that other guys had. And now he'll say that Kalen DeBoer was the guy all along, and I do believe that. I do actually believe that in terms of realistic candidates. I do think if Kirby Smart was out there, would have said yes, then you would have taken him. I think Steve Sarkisian was a potential successor plan back when he was on staff there at Bama. He gets offered the Texas job. Obviously, that changes all of that. Hard to leave Texas and that NIL program right now, and the way that program's coming for Alabama, as great as the job of Alabama really is as well. And obviously Dan Lanning, a lot has been made of his buyout over at Oregon, at least 20 million, probably more than that. And obviously the NIL structure with Phil Park or with Phil Knight and Nike all over there in the Northwest there. So yeah, Kalen DeBoer, I think he what Bama could have done, what they did with some other coaches after Bear Bryant and other coaches where like they've had lack of success, right? They've hired SEC guys and guys that look the part, win the press conference, and get the fan behind them and like, oh my gosh, I've heard of this guy. This is the SEC guy. We know he's going to be able to recruit well at the beginning. Sure, keep on this momentum. But this was the right guy for the job. Make no mistake about that. This could not have been a better hire realistically that Alabama could have made. He is so good. Like you said, he's a winner. He's won everywhere he's done it. His staff is so incredible everywhere he's been. And obviously at Bama, with the resources they have and the opportunity that's there now with Kalen DeBoer, this staff he's put together is incredible, which we'll get into. He's brought over Courtney Morgan as a GM there to retain some guys and keep track of the team. It was so impressive what's happened there in the last 7-8 days at Alabama, and then obviously the last 4 or 5 days since he's been hired there. Obviously, I'm sure he hasn't slept much. He won't sleep much the next couple of months. Obviously, with all the portal exits, very, very tough. Obviously, he's coming into a new ground, the SEC, which is getting bigger and harder than it's ever been. And obviously, having to recruit in a spot where you've never had to recruit against these teams and against these firepowers with, well, which is crazy to say, lesser NIL talent, like lesser things to come to the table than Georgia and Texas and Oregon and other places like that, even Ole Miss right now. So it's a really tough job for him. But if anyone can do it, I think it's him. And I also think with the talent that's already there, right, even though a lot's leaving, they are one of the deepest, most talented rosters in the country. Top three. You can't really argue much lower than that. Um, I think with him, his staff, his X's and O's, his culture, they can win right away there. And obviously, we'll see what happens in the spring portal. But yeah, this is to me, this is super exciting. I have talked myself into a massive Kalen DeBoer fan for Alabama fans.
So you mentioned that a lot of the past coaches that they had brought in for Alabama after these legends, right, all had that SEC footprint, right? And they recruited in that Southeast really well and in the traditional spots well. And you mentioned that Kalen DeBoer doesn't exactly have the same footprint as those guys, right? And that's why it's so important to bring in a good staff, right? I'm gonna let you take over and talk a little bit about the staff that Kalen DeBoer is brought in because I know you're very excited about it.
So there's three groups that he's really hiring from. You've got his group from Washington that he knows and he's bringing back over. He's got the group of coaches that were already on staff that some he tried to keep and some he didn't try to keep. Some he was successful in keeping, some he wasn't. Obviously, most notably T-Rob, Tavares Robinson, going over to Georgia to be the co-defense coordinator. There were rumors that he might have come back. Twitter was buzzing on Alabama tweet. They were going crazy. Everyone was deleting their old tweets about ripping on T-Rob and whatnot, preparing that he was going to come back. He interviewed for hours with Greg Byrne, with Kalen DeBoer to get the job there. They offered him a massive contract to be the full defensive coordinator for Alabama. He obviously turned it down, went over to Georgia. And maybe some players will follow him as well, which we'll talk about in a second. So he's gone. You got to replace him, his spot, and then obviously defensive coordinators. You're keeping Freddie Roach and you're keeping Robert Gillespie right on staff. That's the D line coach, Freddie Roach, and the running back coach, Robert Gillespie. Which, for my money, I think were two of the better groups of this team this past year. This running back talent room was so talented, recruited so well. It did such a good job developing, splitting carries, finding guys, finding different types of players in this room. We mentioned Roydell Williams. He's obviously in the portal, but we love him. Jason McClellan had a great playoffs and season otherwise than that. We got the young guy, Justice Haynes and Richard Young. You get two freshmen coming in that are uber talented. And obviously, Jam Miller, the ultra versatile back there as well for Gillespie and staff to take advantage of. Right. And then obviously Freddie Roach, that Bama D line has had multiple guys. They'll send another guy to the first round this year. Tim Smith, who knows what he's going to do. Very good player in his own right. You got some other guys. They're bringing in LT Overton from A&M, guy we did a video on. Check that out if you want to learn more about him in the portal. You're obviously very high on him and obviously know a lot about him as an Aggie yourself. Those are two guys that I'm very happy that they did keep. And obviously on the offensive side, they brought in everybody else from Washington. And that is such a warm welcome. Obviously, if you're an Alabama fan, you tried to hire Ryan Grubb a year ago. You went over to Washington, you had a blank checkout, and you said, hey, what's it going to take to get you to come down to Alabama? He says no. He realizes, hey, the talent we have in our room. I love Kalen DeBoer, right? We have a good thing going on at Washington right now. Let's ride it out for one more year. And he does that. And obviously, the wide receivers, you got to Dylan Johnson, by the way, was your backup running back. Okay, their starting running back got hurt all the way back in fall camp. That was a big deal. He emerged later in the year, 1,000-yard rusher. Obviously, first-round receivers, McMillan, Polk, and obviously Roma Dunze to cap it all off. Good tight end as well. Bringing over the tight end coach, bringing over Huff, the O-line coach, Joe Moore winning O-line, a guy that's recruited pretty well for Washington and obviously developed extremely well as well. And that's very important with a bunch of those guys in the portal right now. Hopefully you bring some in and make up for some losses at center and left tackle. And obviously, I think it's Jamarcus Russell, right? The wide receiver coach, a guy that probably the best at his position. I would say top 5 guy as position coach, a guy that's developed and recruited super well at Washington. And also you bring in there with the talent that Alabama has and the capabilities that they can bring in guys as well. That's all very, very exciting on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive coordinators, right? You're going to have co-defense coordinators. To me, I think the primary one will be Kane Womack, paired with a guy like Maurice Linguist, both guys that were head coaches at the G5 level. Kane Womack, you know him from South Alabama, the Jaguars down there in Mobile, Alabama, a guy with Southern ties, a guy that knows Kalen DeBoer back when they were at Indiana, right? Indiana in 2019, DeBoer was the offensive coordinator and Womack was the defensive coordinator. Indiana had a very successful year in 2019 and 2020 while Womack was there. Unprecedented for that program, which we talked about with Indiana this offseason. Those guys, I think Maurice Linguist can root pretty well. He's obviously has NFL ties. He has SEC ties with A&M. Also, he was going to be the defense coordinator at Michigan a couple years ago before he was hired away to be the full-time head coach at Buffalo. Those two guys walked away from head coaching jobs to become coordinators at the Power 5 level, the Power 2 level, which shows you just how much money there is to be going around for some of these coordinator positions, which is tough for them. And obviously, I think they have a couple more spots to fill on that staff. On the defensive side, I think one more. I would assume the linebacker position. And we'll see what they do there, though. But yeah, this to me, I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I love this staff. This is about as good as you can because you mentioned some of the criticism of DeBoer at Alabama was fit, and that fit was due to recruiting ties and just lack of SEC ties in the southeast part of the country. And with the offensive guys he brought over from Washington, that didn't really solve it. But also those guys can flat out coach. So I don't really care, right? And then also you're keeping a couple key staff guys, Gillespie and Roach, but also the defensive coordinators guys. You're bringing in very experienced head coaches, right? Or very experienced coaches and guys with Southern ties and guys with ties to recruiting, to developing, and to running a program. And obviously helping you get acclimated at a place like Alabama. Because let's be honest, right? The responsibilities of running a program like Alabama, the boosters with the staff and the expectations, a little bit different than running at Washington or Sioux Falls or Fresno State and all that other stuff. I know Kalen DeBoer can do it, but I think it's awesome that he's surrounding himself with other very experienced coaches and head coaches who know the responsibilities know what it takes, and he can take off the load of him and help out that defense and make him worry just more on overall team or offense and whatnot, which he wants to do.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this to me on air or off air before we got on here that this staff might be better than the staff that Saban had. And I agreed with you to some degree. Like I agree with you there. Like this is a really good staff. When we talk about, oh, does this guy fit? Does this guy fit? Does this guy fit? Is is this person a good coach? Right? Sometimes that's what it comes down to. Get a good coach before you get a good fit. That's what I say. Good coaches can fit. They can fit anywhere they go. Caleb DeBoer was at Sioux Falls. He was at Indiana. He's at Fresno State. He's at Washington. He's at Eastern Michigan. He's been everywhere, right? He's been everywhere except the Southeast, all right? So to say that he can't adapt to his surroundings is preposterous. Preposterous. These transfer portal players, some of these really, really, really big names, we're going to get to those guys later in the video. Spoilers. Those are really big. And no one's expecting a national championship in the first year. But when we give out our grades, when me and you give out our grades, we look at expectations, right? We say an A would be exceeding those expectations, right? A B would be meeting those expectations. And a C would be not meeting those expectations. So I think a lot of people would be quick to grade Kalen DeBoer an A higher. But the thing is, the expectations at Alabama, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is more than one national championship per decade.
Yeah, and to be honest, fair or not, that is what the expectation is now because of what Saban did and because of how he did it, how quickly he did it in year 3. Year 2, they were undefeated, going to play number 1 Florida or number 2 Florida at the time because you were number 1, right? And obviously, year 3, you won it all, going undefeated in Pasadena, beating Texas there. So obviously, with what's happening in this portal era and the 12-team playoffs, it might be a little bit harder than ever to win national titles. But at the same time, like that's what you get when you took this job. You know that. That's what the expectation is. You don't have to come and be Saban. You don't have to win 5, right? Or 6 in 12 years, 17 years, whatever it was. But you also have to win national championships. You have to.
Yes. So that is exactly why I will give this hire a B, a flat B. I think he can meet expectations. I think he can meet expectations. Which, by the way, is absurd that I am saying that, by the way. That is absurd that I'm saying that he can meet the expectations of the Bama fans and the ADs after the greatest coach of all time was just there at Alabama winning 6 national championships. I think that's an amazing, that's probably the best grade that I could have possibly given. If you were to say A, you're basically saying you just hired Nick Saban 2.0, right? If you were to give
Yeah,
this hire
yeah.
an A, you're saying this coach is as good, if not better, than Nick Saban.
Yeah, and that is crazy. Do not listen to anybody who says that because yes, while DeBoer, who knows? He could win 4 straight right now and do something that's never been done ever, right? But the reality is like that's probably not going to happen. And to say that someone is going to be better than Saban, nobody has proof. Nobody can do that what he did at that level. Um, and so we'll see. And also in large part thanks to him, Saban, there are all these rules in college football and programs that are just firing on all cylinders because he pushed them to become that good. And now his successor, Kalen DeBoer, has to deal with those consequences. We have programs like Oregon and Texas, Ohio State, all just Georgia humming nationally, NIL and otherwise as well. So yeah, this is an incredibly tough spot to be in. I'm gonna go B plus because I am a little bit higher than you, right? And I do think he wins at least. I do 2 in a decade is crazy, but also I would just slim the expectation down just a little bit because of the 12-team playoffs, because of how much harder it will be to win national championships. So
Or easier.
or easier, because if you get in, then it's so hard to outcoach
Because
Kalen
what if
DeBoer.
what if you're hurt at the beginning of the year, and then you get a guy coming back for the playoffs. It's like kind of a it's an interesting thing to argue and talk about, but I'll accept your slimming down of the expectations.
And that's why I'm gonna go B plus here because I think if he wins 2 national titles in this decade, like that would be incredibly successful tenure for him at Alabama. That would
Absolutely.
be
That'd
incredible.
be insane. If he wins a national championship for Alabama, that is a good hire, great hire, an excellent hire.
Yeah, exactly. It's about as good as you can do, especially with everything going on. And obviously, short term, it looks all doom and gloom. I know a lot of Bama fans right now are freaking out. You got like, all these guys in the portal. Saban's gone. All of a sudden, you're not the big bad wolf anymore, and you're doing to you're ugh, teams are doing to you what you have done to them for so long. It doesn't feel so good on the other side, but I get it though. There's nerves. There's a lot of unanswered questions to see how will he recruit, how will he maintain expectations, how he does. The thing is, he's a killer, man. I think Kalen DeBoer is an absolute killer. He is cold blooded. He knows exactly what he needs to do to get it done. You talk about a guy like Nick Saban that was process oriented, all the best things about him in creating a winning environment. I think Kalen DeBoer knows all that and he will be able to replicate that kind of environment and that kind of culture. We'll see what will lead to championships. I don't know, but I do think this was a great hire for Alabama, and that's why I'll go B plus.
I do want to put on the record too. I gave this hire a B. The only person that they could have hired that I would have given an A would be Kirby Smart, and that was never going
Yes,
to happen. That was
yeah.
never going to happen. That is the only person that I could have possibly given an A to. So in my eyes, this is probably the best possible hire. It was the
To
best
me, to me,
realistic hire to me. To
I do
me,
think Sark would have been really interesting. Now, I do think that DeBoer, first of all, is 2-0 against Sark, by the way. We'll just say that with probably less talent, which is probably really interesting. But also,
not
like, I do think
probably like
Sark,
with less talent.
yes. Okay, yes, exactly. Well, a year ago, maybe. I don't know. But regardless, yes, yes, yes. But Sark would have been interesting. I do think like this is exactly why Greg Byrne, first of all, is an incredible AD, right? With an impossible task. This is why he makes the hires instead of the Alabama fan base or instead of Twitter fan bases or in message boards, because message boards would have thrown everything at Dan Lanning, right? A guy that with Southern ties. Now he's very good. He will thrive at Oregon. I'm sure he will. Or a guy like Lane Kiffin or somebody else with SEC ties, right? Blah, blah, blah. A good recruiter that you know he's going to be able to maintain the recruiting levels that Nick Saban did, but also like it's Bama. Okay. You couldn't fall out of bed with a top 10 class. Okay. Like Kalen DeBoer, he's a grinder. You know he'll get it done on the recruiting trail. I'm not too concerned with that. Will he be top three every year? I don't know, but I'm sure he'll have a talented enough roster to win titles and to compete for them every year. But to me, this is just such a just a just I have nothing. I cannot be more up, applauding, right? Is that the word of this Alabama administration at handling this and to find a guy and zero in a guy like Kalen DeBoer?
Let's talk about our next guy. Let's stay in the state of Alabama, shall we? Let's talk about Troy hiring Jared Parker. Originally, Notre Dame offensive coordinator last year. And by the way, like I'll defend his offense last year. I mean, they were eighth in scoring, in scoring offense in the entire country last year. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. He was also at West Virginia as the offensive coordinator there for a couple of years, in between Will Greer and our guy Garrett Green. Well, actually, yeah, I guess so. I guess so. I don't know who the quarterback would have been after. What's his name? Transferred to Troy, actually. But anyways, Penn State. He was wide receiver coach there. He was also Duke wide receiver coach. And he was actually, he has been a head coach before. He was a head coach for 6 games as the interim head coach for Purdue, and he went 0-6. So also have to think about that is a pretty decent resume to me. That's a pretty decent resume, especially for like uh, to get a guy like that, a G5 program like Troy. I would say that's pretty okay. That's pretty okay. I know you might feel a little bit differently. Let me hear what you got to say about Jared Parker.
Well, first of all, what I'll say is Troy and that administration, and it was obviously it was different. Same one that hired Summerall, but different one that hired Neil Brown. They hit the jackpot on two coaches. Two of the last three coaches have been money hits and guys that were promoted to really good jobs above them because of the success that they had at Troy, which is the
Two different
goal.
ADs though.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is the goal. If this hire works out, I've written my notes here. If this hire works out, like Parker will not be here in 4 years. Like like that's the reality. Like either way, I think he won't be here in 4 years. But obviously he'll go to another place. And if he really hits again, like Summerall did, like Neil Brown did, he'll go up in a level and return back to the Power Five or Power Two, whatever you want to call it. I do think you mentioned to get a program like Troy to get a Power Five coordinator, especially, well, I mean, Notre Dame is not really in the Power Five, but you know what I mean. A, a very high level programs coordinator is a pretty impressive thing to do. And that speaks volume to the amount of, you know, influence and money this program has down in the Sun Belt. And obviously the Sun Belt, you mentioned it, we covered it all year. Very competitive Sun Belt, right? You got a lot of change happening at the top with Troy and James Madison. A lot of continuity though, with a lot of other coaches though and programs. Kane Womack, another guy, going to be replacing them at South Alabama, we talked about earlier. But yeah, the expectation here, oh, I don't know. He's young. He's only in his 40s, which is good, right? But they have won 8 Sun Belt titles since 2006. That is pretty damn good.
3 in the last 8 years.
Yeah. This is a program that is humming right now, and it's to take over and continue that success. I know that is hard after with the transfer portal and everything that happens with NIL after losing a coach. I know it's hard to come into a program and have to re-recruit all the players that were really good and help you win a conference title a year ago, right? But I don't know if I love this. It's giving me major Chip Lindsey vibes, right? He's a guy that came over from Auburn and Arizona State to come over to Troy to be their head coach. He's obviously, I think he's over at North Carolina right now as their OC. He's a guy that was, good, not very great though at all for Troy standards after Neil Brown. He didn't work out. They hired John Sermo, obviously was the right hire there, who came back. He does have ties to Jared Parker does have ties to Neil Brown, right? They were together back in West Virginia, which is a good thing there for Troy fans. Obviously, more Neil Brown is better, obviously, but I don't know. The staff is bringing over some guys from Notre Dame. I like that. He's bringing back Caleb Carbine, who was a former Troy offensive lineman, if you remember him back in his playing days. He'll come back, who joins actually Parker from Notre Dame to be the O-line coach at Troy, which is pretty interesting there. Exciting for him and obviously Troy fans alike. I don't know, man. I just have a weird feeling about this. I didn't love what they did offensively, schematically at Notre Dame. I know they were breaking in some new young wide receivers. Obviously, Sam Hartman's first year in a different offense was tough for him. But at times they played really well, right? The eighth in the country, like you mentioned, with a pretty tough schedule themselves.
Yeah.
So I like it. I just don't love. I can't get super excited about this hire like I have some of the other ones in this cycle, and like I should be for a job like Troy in the Sun Belt.
Yeah, I'll say three. There were 3 games that Sam Hartman played not good in. You had the Ohio State game, you had the Louisville game, and then you had the Clemson game. He did not play well in any of those games, right? And Sam Hartman's a good quarterback. But like you said, he was in this slow mesh read, RPO offense at Wake Forest for a number of years. Adjusting is a lot, certainly. I will say at West Virginia, the year before he came, they were horrible because that was the year after Will Greer came. I think they averaged like 20 points per game. They were abysmal. They were terrible. Bottom feeder offense. And when he came that next year, they immediately improved. They were not an unbelievable offense, but they immediately improved with subpar quarterback play. So I will give him that. He's done a really good job with rushing attacks everywhere he's been. He's had 1,000-yard rushers both years that he was at West Virginia. Aldrich Estime this year, of course. And Troy's kind of bread and butter this year was, look, Gunnar Watson was a really good quarterback this year. But Kamani Vidal was kind of their bread and butter down the stretch. And when they couldn't get
Mm.
him going against Duke, it was tough picking. It was tough going for Troy. So you're looking at a guy that I think is going to be able to effectively run the ball the way that Troy wants to. And they got some bigger boys than I think some of these other teams in the Sun Belt. So I know you always say, oh, this team's going to lean on this other team, right? Well, I think Troy, that might be some of what they do. That might be some of what they do. So I don't hate this as much as you hate this, but I'll say I sneakily like Nathan Burton. Do you see that he brought in defense coordinator at Kennesaw State? I think he was pretty good, man. He's also defense coordinator at Georgia Tech for a couple years. Didn't necessarily work out there, but I like it. I like it. We'll see who he hires as offensive coordinator. It will probably be don't know. You think Jared Parker's gonna kind of let it go, or you think he's gonna kind of want his hands in this offense? He'll probably want his hands in this
It's
offense. This is his first head coaching job.
That's the thing. You don't want it to go wrong, but also like, is he going to be overwhelmed? Right? Does he want that help? Does he want to be more of an overseer kind of guy? He saw exactly how it was done with Marcus Williams or with Marcus Freeman in that transition, right? Going from DC to head coach and maybe, kind of being a little bit more relaxed or being more of an overseer and manager there. Obviously, Marcus Freeman did his job defensively as well at Notre Dame, but also, let some of that staff do their thing there at Notre Dame. Gerard Parker, yeah, we'll see what he does there. I do think you mentioned a couple games he's struggling. I'd also throw Duke in there, but also I'll say like Mike Elko does that to anybody, right? I don't blame Jared Parker or Sam Hartman in that game. NC State, a pretty darn good defense and well coached team. He did play very well in, and those are kind of guys in schemes that they'll see in the Sun Belt here. And he can have success, and I'm sure he will because it's Troy, because of the resources, and because of the recent success they've had there. But is this a home run hire for me? That's when I'm struggling to fall in love. I would have loved to see them continue this momentum. Like you saw what Tulane had, right? They nailed the Willie Fritz hire. Have him for a couple years of really high level success. And then you bring in a guy like John Summerall, a guy that got to me really, really excited. They're recruiting better than ever right now. And obviously Troy is super familiar with him. Would have loved to see something along those lines. I don't know who, but I would have liked something a little bit more exciting. But also at the same time, like that's why these guys get paid to make these decisions. Okay, he brought in John Summerall, the 80 there. I trust him to make another good hire. And that's why we don't let fans and message boards and guys who run podcasts hire coaches for your athletic departments.
Absolutely. I'll say to leave this on a good note before we get into expectations and grades. The stat that I like to look at for offensive coaches specifically, second half points per game, right? Are you making those adjustments when you need to? Jared Parker's Notre Dame was second in the country in second half points per game. So something to think about there. I know it's just one stat, doesn't paint the whole picture, but something to think about for sure. Let's get into expectations. My expectations for Troy, competing for Sun Belt titles. That's it. Competing for Sun Belt titles. I don't know that you can expect Troy to make the college football playoffs, but at the same time, you have a really good year, like maybe, like every once in every 6 or 7, 8 years, right? But Sun Belt championships, that's what they're looking for. They've had 3 in the last 8 seasons, like I mentioned before. Like you mentioned, 8 in the last, I don't know, was that 18 years? So they've had success. They've had success in the conference. The expectations for this next coach to come in and do the same exact thing. So can Jared Parker do that? I don't know. I'll give it a B minus. I think there's a really good chance that he meets expectations, but I think there's more of a chance that he possibly falls short. But what do I know? Right? What do I know?
Yeah, I'm gonna go C plus there as well, or C plus there. I do think he's gonna fall short of expectations as well. Um, I do think they'll be able to compete in the Sun Belt for sure. Can they win as many championships like they did under Summerall and Neil Brown? I don't know for sure. At the same time, that college football playoff, if he makes the playoffs, this is an A, right? That's a huge deal for this program, for the fan base, for the conference, money wise, exposure, recruiting, all that good stuff that comes with that. And that's what it offers, the 12 team playoffs with that fifth auto bid going to a group of 5 conference, which is really exciting. And obviously, Sun Belt is one of those conferences that has a real shot to do it just about every year. And Troy, with their ability to maintain and to collect that talent, which I do think he's a good enough recruiter to get that done there at Troy, they can do it with the talent there. But I do think, like you said, more often than not, if this simulates 100 times, I think 30, 40 times that this happens. I think he fails expectations. Obviously, we're huge Sun Belt fans. We're huge Troy fans here, in general, not like for real Troy fans, but we're rooting for them in the Sun Belt. So we love to see him succeed. And obviously, for Troy fans, I know you guys want to as well. Let us know in the comments what you guys think about this hire. Are we wrong? Are we right? Cause for concerns, cause for intrigue and excitement. What else you got there for us?
Well, I don't know. This was I don't want to say confusing hire to me, but it was different than what I thought it was going to be. So I don't hate it. Again, I don't hate it. I do not hate it. I never said that. fact, I was spreading optimism over here. Let the record show when he does take off, I was showing some optimism over here, right? But we'll we'll see. We'll see if he can get it done year one. Right? That's still a tough ask. Let's move on. Let's go to New Mexico State. Let's go to the Aggies. Gosh, these last two seasons have been unbelievable for New Mexico State. Jerry freaking Kill is a great head coach. If that wasn't already stated, and people didn't already know that, Jerry Kill's a great head coach. He steps away from the game of football once again for the second time, actually, because of health reasons, and leaves it in the hands of his, what I believe was his wide receiver coach,
Yep.
Tony Sanchez, University of Mexico State, or New Mexico State University alum, Tony Sanchez.
Hmm. By the way, look at
So
that shirt. Look at that picture of him. Is Bishop Gorman. We love that. We love that.
I know, can you believe
Recruiting
that?
ties. Recruiting, recruiting, recruiting. Powerhouse Bishop Gorman.
You think they're gonna get a lot of Bishop Gorman guys over there at New Mexico State?
I don't know. I don't know any Zachariah branches that are heading us at New Mexico State, but you know what? It helps with recruiting. Other high school coaches will respect that in the area and say, "Hey, you want to play for a guy like that? I wouldn't mind my kid playing for a guy like that." You mentioned, yeah, Jerry Kill stepping down, he's going to be actually taking an off the field role at Vanderbilt, maybe a little bit less stress on his health. Obviously, I think that's a big deal with it. Obviously, he's got places in Vanderbilt or in Nashville as well. Yeah, Sanchez going to be the 36th head coach for New Mexico State. He's been there for 2 years as a wide receiver coach, but you mentioned he was an alma mater there. He played there for a couple years. Also was an assistant coach there during his college days as well. This is a really interesting hire.
Yeah. Fun fact, he actually coached Ronnie Stanley in high school.
Wow. Yep.
So
Yep.
Pro Bowl offensive lineman.
Stud
Then here's
himself.
also a name drop that I wrote down, but I had to write it down because it's such a name drop. Ready for this one? Xavier Grimble. Yep, you Steelers fans out there. Yep, he coached Xavier Grimble in high school. But yeah, I mean Tony Sanchez, he's got an okay resume. Now it didn't work at UNLV. All right. But let me defend Tony Sanchez here for a second. The program of UNLV has been to 5 bowl games its entirety. And one of them, their only double-digit win season ever was with Randall Cunningham playing quarterback, which also led to the scandal where they happened to be playing ineligible players that were not eligible to play. You can read about that one on your own. But let's just say that program at UNLV is not like what Barry Odom did last year was an anomaly. An
Yes.
anomaly. So I don't blame Tony Sanchez. Yeah, sure, he never made a bowl game. Sure. All right. Let's kick this guy while he's down. All right. But I don't know, man. Who else are you gonna get at New Mexico? Like, what would have been your hire at New Mexico State? Like, it's hard to say. Like,
It, it's a really tough spot because we talked about it with Alabama and Kalen DeBoer. Like having a hire that late in the cycle is brutal. It's brutal. And Jerry Kill, yes, we knew he was going to step down, but also you look at A&M. Look at A&M, right? They had guys. It was November, early November, and they'd fired Jimbo already, so they can figure out staff and whatnot, warn the players, and so it kind of like it's old news by the time the portal hits, and you can hit the ground running. Right with New Mexico State, Tony Sanchez, you almost had to go with a guy on staff and promote from within, and he's obviously very qualified. Has had a coach on the West Coast before, right in the Mountain Time Zone there at UNLV. I like this. I do like this. He was also a guy that was with Jerry Kill at TCU, right? For
yeah,
for a year there, and
was
so
he as an
that's
analyst
obviously
there? I believe he was like an analyst
yeah,
there,
that
offensive
sounds right.
analyst.
So yeah, it's a good thing for both of them. You keep continuity. You had success with Jerry Kill like you've never had before at New Mexico State, and you continue to ride that momentum with Tony Sanchez.
Yeah, I do think what I do really like too. Jerry Kill did a good job bringing in a good staff as well, like he always does. I do like one hire. I'll point out Joe Morris, defense coordinator. He was a defense coordinator this past year at Sam Houston State. San Diego State had a really good defense this past year. Very good. And they were coming up
Mhm.
from the FCS level, and they had the number one defense in the CUSA.
And not a lot was good about that team, right? They did not
No,
have a lot of great stuff on that Bearcats team.
no.
It was that defense.
It's a defense that kept them in game. Like you had when they went like 0-7, was it to start the season? And you're like, oh, when are they going to get their first win? They had many opportunities to do it because of that defense, right? And that
Hmm.
was Jerry Kill's thing too. Like New Mexico State doesn't have the talent to have an elite defense, but he coached them well enough to like have a top 80 defense. Like they had a top
Hmm.
80 defense just about every year. The only thing different about last year was why it was so special. You had a good quarterback in Diego Pavia and kind of an explosive offense there. You're not going to have that luxury next year. You're not going to have that luxury next year because I believe Diego Pavia was in the portal, correct? But
I'll double check that right now.
so it's gonna be tough because sometimes these smaller programs, you just you're just not historically a good program. You don't have the money. You're in a weird spot geographically. You got to just coach a good defense. You got to have a good defensive coach, and then you just got to have a quarterback every few years, right? So what is the expectations for New Mexico State? They're different than the other two teams that we covered. We just talked about Alabama and their expectations. As you could believe it or not, they're larger expectations than New Mexico State and Troy's expectations. New Mexico State's expectations. Making bowl games isn't like an every year thing. It's not. It's not. Do you have an expectation for New Mexico State?
Yeah, every 3 years, make a bowl game, be competitive in the CUSA. I do think it helps moving to the CUSA, which is not a super strong conference. I do think there are wins to be had in conference. That's why making a bowl game probably becomes a little bit more common than you've had in your previous existence. I mean, Doug Martin made a bowl game in 2017 on a 7-6 record, right? And that bought him a couple years of really bad football for you down there in New Mexico State. So like that, that's how
Like
that's how important it
very
was.
bad years of New Mexico State football.
Yes, and so Jared Kill goes to two straight bowl games and win 10 games this year. Um, yeah, and obviously, yeah, I think that's it. I do think the staff he put together. You mentioned the DC. I did the OC, right? Jaleel Muhammad Langford. I hope I butchered that. I hope I didn't butcher that name. He's got an awesome story. He was the running backs coach last year in college. Right back in college, he played both sides of the ball. At Wyoming. He started at running back, was their leading rusher, gets hurt for the season, then changed to a linebacker, and a year later is their leading tackler. Right, that's awesome. I love that guy. I love that grit there. Anything you need from my team, I got you, kind of guy. I assume he'll run a similar offense to Jerry Kill, which was pretty awesome and very like fun and new for this USA, which is important at a place like that with the lack of talent that they do have there. The running backs coach, I would be remiss if I didn't shout him out. David Cobb, go for legend, right? Getting his first running back gig there in Division I football. This is awesome for him. He was obviously very famous, very good Big Ten running back in the early 2010s, I believe, for Jerry Kill, if I'm doing my math right there, go for wise, which is a pretty full circle thing there. And yeah, they've been awful. New Mexico State has been awful for a long time, and Jerry Kill kind of surged that program and continue that expectation, continue that to push the expectations up closer to that bowl wins, closer to 5 to 6 wins a year, 7, and then pop for an 8 win year, whatever, when the CUSA is down. And obviously making a bowl game will be impressive, right? But try to stay at that middle half of that CUSA and not fall below that. Let's recruit a little bit better than Jerry Kill even did, and let's not get decimated by the portal every year.
Yeah, and before they moved to the CUSA this year, I would have said that the expectation is 4 wins. Like
Hmm.
that's legitimately the expectation. But I think it's raised. I think bowl games are in sight because you play the CUSA schedule and you can catch Middle Tennessee State, right? Especially they got a new coach there, Derek Mason. You can catch maybe Western Kentucky in an off game where their offense isn't as high flying as they want it to be. Maybe you can catch a Sam Houston. You can catch a Kennesaw State. You can catch some of these lower tier teams and you can win those ball games, I think. So I'm gonna set the expectation at a bowl game. Well, I'll do what you did, a bowl game every 3 years. And I think Tony Sanchez will meet those expectations.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, despite how terrible UNLV went for him, I think I think he can get it done. I think he can get it done in this conference. I think it's easier to get done. So I'll give it a B plus higher. If he's Jerry Kill's
Oh,
guy, and if he's a New Mexico State guy, he's my guy. That's what I'll
yeah.
say.
All right, I love that. I love that for New Mexico State. I'm sure that those fans are happy right now listening to that. I'm gonna go B, slightly lower than you, but I do think this is still a good hire for New Mexico State. Right? Let's be honest with what the reality of the program is and the reality of the expectations and what can be accomplished there and what Jared Kill did there. Don't let that fool you. We talked about that. Like 10 wins is ridiculous. Beating Auburn is ridiculous. You're not going to do that in a bye
Second
game.
time in program history. Last time was 1960.
Yeah, it was super impressive there. It sucks that he had to retire. Obviously, he can't capture that momentum. We'll see if Tony Sanchez can. I do think more times than not, he will he will do well in this job here in New Mexico State. We'll see how he does recruiting. It sounds like he's kind of a guy that like I bet he'd be happy, right, at New Mexico State. If he wins a couple bowl games there, they're going to give him a good contract, right? They're going to give him stability there. And I think he can like that and build and grow a program and move into that top half of the CUSA.
If he wins a bowl game, he's getting a gigantic extension.
Yes, especially this year. And it sucks. Obviously, Pavila, it sounds like it's Washington State and another school is there for him. Would suck to lose him as he's a dog. He peed on the New Mexico logo, right? Which was awesome. That's the kind of guy you love for the Aggies down there in the Q. I'm sorry, there you're drinking some water, but no, this is good. I think this will work out for New Mexico State. Let us know how you're feeling about this because obviously we did our research, but I didn't know a ton about him, and obviously you guys know better than we do as New Mexico State fans. How does the program feel? How do fans feel about this? Was he the right guy? Internal hire. It usually is a good thing. I'm sure Jerry Kill gave the approval. Like you mentioned, if he's a Jerry Kill guy, he's an R guy. Um, so yeah, we'll see, but we'll see though.
Let's get into the transfer portal stuff and let's start hot. Yeah, you knew we were going to talk about it. His name is Caleb Downs, and he is a dog. Out of high school, we knew this guy. Minka Fitzpatrick 2.0. That's what it was. A guy that's going to come out as a true freshman and immediate impact, and he absolutely did. He was really good. He was really, really good for them. And I don't know that he's officially entered the transfer portal, but he's declared his intentions to enter the transfer portal. So we're going to talk about it.
It takes a couple days usually for things to actually process through the school, through the NCAA. You know how slow they are. Goddamn NCAA. But yes, it sounds like he can still come back. He can still withdraw and come back. But for all intents and purposes, this video sounds like he'll end up at a new school next year. We're hearing a couple schools from our end. Where do you think he's going to end up at? Where are you hearing?
I'm here in Ohio State. I think that's kind of the place because Georgia didn't his brother there something that happened with his brother at Georgia, right?
I have not. I would love to know about that. I to be honest, I've been hearing a lot of Georgia and Ohio State was the other school. Obviously, Georgia is a guy. Obviously, he grew up in the state of Georgia. A lot of ties there. Obviously, T. Rob is over at Georgia, which we talked about in our Kalen DeBoer video. Um, and obviously Kirby Smart knows him very well. He wants to be developed. He can do that at both Ohio State and Georgia, and I would argue Bama as well to be a focal point in that Kane Womack defense, which that 4-2-5 loves that safety and obviously can funnel everything to him. But yeah, this is a playmaker here. He was obviously a stud his year one. He was my SEC newcomer prediction of the back in August, and obviously that came true as he was a stud. He was second team All American. Over 100 tackles at the safety position for a true freshman in the SEC is ridiculous. He was everywhere. He returned punts for them at times this year. Minka Fitzpatrick was the comp, and it could not have been more true. But he's his own player. Obviously, he was the guy that Bama fans wanted to keep more than anybody. A lot of the other guys, a couple guys we'll talk about on this in this episode. Bama fans probably had a sense they were probably heading out. Caleb Downs was a guy they really, really wanted. He's a guy that you can build your team, build your defense around, culture, scheme, playmaking, all that good stuff that he brings to you. Not only the tangibles, but the intangibles as well. You cannot say enough good things about Caleb Downs. I wish him nothing but the best. And I'm sure Alabama fans do as well, but it sucks for them to lose a guy like that. And that's the unfamiliar territory for Alabama fans, right? Usually you're taking that best player on someone else's defense. And now Caleb Downs, right? A guy that stood out over multiple first round picks this year. It sucks.
Yeah. So what I was referring to earlier about Caleb Downs' brother, which by the way, I called him Caleb Downs' brother. His name's Josh Downs, and he plays in the NFL, and he was absolutely electric for the North Carolina Tar Heels. He was never recruited by Georgia, and I think the relationship with the parents, I don't know. I've heard some things. I'm not trying to speculate, but Georgia, I think, would be the ideal landing spot for him. I'm not saying that he will land there necessarily. My pick for this was Ohio State, but I think ideally an ideal landing spot for him would be at Georgia, right? But there will be plenty of other teams that are going to dump a bag to get this guy. Dump a bag. There's already Aggie. I'm on in a bunch of Aggie communities or whatever. You're already hearing people just like talk about this is like the guy that you would dump your entire NIL fund for, which I don't necessarily agree with for positional value purposes. But he is that spectacular of an athlete, and you mentioned everything. He's unbelievable at everything he does. And out of high school, we knew that things were going to happen. We knew he was this good. We knew he was this good. He will be in the NFL. He just will be drafted from a different team than Alabama. So we'll see. I mean, is Alabama out of this, you think, completely?
No, to me, what I would do is I would say, as of right now, where we stand, I would say 5%. And this is my opinion, what I've been hearing. Obviously, things can change. And obviously, we know now more than ever, things are fluid. Things are so fluid in the portal. We're recording this Wednesday night. By Thursday morning, he can be committed, or there could be three other teams that are vying for him. I would go like 5% going back to Bama, 25% to Ohio State, and then the rest 70% going to Georgia. I do think the longer this drags out, the more teams you will start hearing. And maybe Caleb Downs realizes, hey, whoa, like I could drive up a bidding war right here. Like I am one of one, and I'm Caleb Downs. And then you see Oregon come into play. Somehow Texas gets their names in there, A&M, Miami, and then you're hearing, oh, okay, these schools are in there, and now it'll be bag season, and now anyone is in play. Ole Miss, LSU, sneaky. So we'll see. But obviously, if it ended today and tonight, I would go Georgia, Ohio State, like you said. But we will see. I do think from what I did hear something that he wants to end it pretty quickly. It won't take too long. Um, but also like who knows? He's 18, 19 years old. He's in a spot where yes, he was highly recruited out of high school, and that recruitment was crazy. Not crazy, but very intense in terms of a lot of people wanted him because they knew how good he was. Instant impact kind of guy, which we saw this year. But not only did you see it, but he exceeded expectations as a 5-star. He exceeded his expectations. His transfer portal grade is even higher than his recruitment grade like just a year ago. So yeah, this one hurts for Bama. And but obviously whoever lands him will be getting a stud.
Let's talk about another Bama transfer. Let's just get him out of the way. Huh? Isaiah Bond, the Iron Bowl hero, right? He transfers. He's going to Texas. I think Texas does a really good thing. They build their offensive line and defensive line. They build their trenches in the recruiting class, right? They put all of their effort into that recruiting wise. And then they go out and they get these stud transfers that make an immediate impact at these skill positions. And I think that's the right way to do it. I think that's an absolute fantastic way to do it. And part of that is going to include Isaiah Bond. Very good receiver. He's got good hands. He's a good route runner. Took a big step this year, I think. Is he on three? I believe had him as the number one wide receiver in the transfer portal. I don't know if I would make him the best in the transfer portal if I was to rate these guys, but I don't rate these guys because I'm not qualified to rate these guys. But I think he's still a very good player, and Texas fans are absolutely ecstatic to get him.
I do think part of that rating is like the projection and the excitement that he could have in a Sarkisian offense. But the production of a guy like Evan Stewart, we've seen that a lot higher than a guy like Isaiah Bond. But Isaiah Bond in that Sarkisian offense with Quinn Ewers throwing the football to him is very exciting when he runs a 4-2, yada, yada, yada. You see that 17 in Bama, that's just a blur on your screen. He's not quite Jalen Waddle, but he's damn, damn good there for Bama. And obviously, they were devastated. I saw a lot of hate going over to him, which was ridiculous from Bama fans. Let the guy make some money. Okay, everyone else is doing it in college football. Let him do it. And everyone's trying to take back the Iron Bowl catch and call Jalen Monroe. Both guys made a heck of a play. It was awesome. Just cherish that moment. Okay, you beat Auburn. Okay, you guys should be excited enough about that, anyways. Um, but yeah, you mentioned the way that Texas is building their program, right? I'm sorry, I cut out there. Building their roster is the right way to do the trenches, because how often can you find a guy that's an elite guy in the trenches in the portal? It's very hard to do. Ask Colorado how hard it was to do a year ago, right? You can't really do that for all your spots there, and they've done such a good job there with Sark and doing that and formatting a plan and carrying it out to perfection. They had Matthew Golden, they had Isaiah Bond to a room that a lot of people had question marks about as the year ended, with Worthy and Mitchell and Sanders and Jonathan Brooks heading off the NFL. But now you insert Matthew Golden. We did a video about earlier in the year. Isaiah Bond, freak, 4-2, speedster kind of guy, deep threat, and some other guys in that room, along with some five stars.
Like Jonte Cook, yeah, Silas Bolden transferring from Oregon State. I do think this is a really good wide receiver room for Texas. And I think Isaiah Bonnett, I think he'll be a guy immediately that impacts his offense. Immediately. I don't know if he'll be the number one guy there. We'll see if Jonte Cook takes a giant step. Hearing really good things about him, being an absolute athlete, an absolute talent. So it'll be really, really interesting to see all of that. So what does this mean for Alabama though, CD?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I mean, you have a guy like Isaiah Bond leave. You have a guy like Malik Benson leave. Two guys that we were counting on for a year, the next year, in an already limited passing offense. But also, like, you bring in DeBoer, you bring in Grubb, you bring in Russell, like we talked about earlier in the episode, with the Kalen DeBoer portion of it, the coaching carousel hire. You think they're gonna fix the offense, especially that passing game. Remains to be seen, but a guy like Isaiah Bond could have thrived in that offense as well. But obviously, you know, it's not for everybody. Isaiah Bond saw a chance to make some money off his performance and his play, and he took it. And I'm happy for him in doing so, and also be developed and make a lot of money. You saw what AD Mitchell did at Texas. He'll probably be a first round pick. Xavier Worthy, same thing, going to Texas out of high school. He'll probably make much money in the NFL as well. But yeah, Bama's gonna miss him. Like, look for guys like Kobe Prentice, but guys like Kendrick Law and others step up, make some plays. You got Jalen Hale there. You got a couple freshmen coming in right away. We'll see what Ryan Williams does for Alabama as a 16-year-old kid. Can he come on campus and be a baller? I think so. But also it opens the door for guys like them and some other in-state guys to maybe get their spot. And obviously Bama's loaded at wide receiver like they always are. But that depth definitely took a shot there with Bond and Benson in the portal.
We sure Ryan Williams ends up at Alabama?
Well, that's the thing. I'd say we'll see what he does there. But obviously, to me, this opens the gates wide open for him to come in and play right away. Not that he would need anyone to leave, but also there's a massive need for him there. But we will see.
Let's talk about our last Bama guy for the day. Let's talk about Caden Proctor, the guy that I think is the most important player in the transfer portal right now. Because how often do you see a left tackle, just a starting left tackle, that has the ability to start at Alabama, right? This man is starting at just about any school that he goes to. He's a monster.
Every single school, whether at left tackle, whether at right tackle, you throw him in a guard. A guy, this guy, and it only happens in certain situations where a guy like this magnitude, him and Caleb Downs, come into a portal because of a coaching change, right? At a place like Alabama, someone retires, and obviously maybe he's a little homesick, maybe he's missing Iowa, maybe they're offering a bunch of money that Bama can't quite match, and they get it done there. But yeah, he struggled early in the year. A lot was made of the Texas game. A lot was made of the Ole Miss game. A lot was made of the USF game for Proctor, but he was a freshman, thrown into the fire. And there's a reason why he was playing over a guy like Pritchard. And he also gutted it out in the Rose Bowl, right? He was obviously not 100% at all. But you know what? He showed up. He played very, very hard. He did his best against a really, really good front in Michigan. Got developed for a year at Alabama. And I think he will take a massive step forward next year and be a stud wherever he is at for another 2 years and off to the NFL.
And we say wherever he goes, right? But we know it's probably Iowa, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So if you remember following this recruiting story a couple years back, he had originally committed to Iowa and then flipped to Bama. Iowa fans went nuts. Went
Yeah.
nuts.
And
In-state guy, you thought you'd locked him in, and then boom, all of a sudden.
that speaks to a lot of stuff and maybe a new kind of way to recruit high level players that maybe you don't know for sure you're going to be able to sign at the end, but also you're going to have a second crack at him potentially in the portal a couple years later. And that happens here for Iowa. And they recruited Caden Proctor super hard. Now the fans may have burned their bridges, but the coaching staff didn't, and they were smart not to because who knows what happens in the portal. Who knows what can happen in the next couple of years of college football for these players? A lot of times you get a second chance at them, and those relationships matter. And to go back in the portal, you're fielding all those offers, and you get one from Iowa. You're like, hey, I know that coach. I get a text from them, and that really helps for you. Obviously, looking to go home, get homesick, whatever it is, get some money there for Proctor. But yeah, it's a tough loss for Bama. Now they have talent there. Elijah Pritchard, Miles McVay, other guys there coming in. Obviously, Bama will never be short of offensive linemen as it stands right now. But yeah, this one stings. And you mentioned positional value. Like you can't replace a guy like Proctor. You just can't in the portal, right? You can do it over a couple years in recruiting and developing, sure, maybe. But in the portal, just a quick fix like this is a massive, massive loss. And obviously, he's a 5-star everywhere transferring number two, number one player, depending where you look, whatever it is. Proctor is a monster.
Let's talk Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard has already committed to Notre Dame, going over there, new offensive coordinator. But guess what? He's going to be squaring off against his former coach, Mike Elko, in week 1 on the road in College Station. Riley Leonard, if you haven't had a chance to watch him play, this year you may not have been as impressed, right? You may have been impressed with his athleticism, but not necessarily the way that he threw the ball. If you look back at his 2022 season, he was really good. He was really, really good. He was battling injuries all year this year. I think he'll be back. He brings a little bit more athleticism than Sam Hartman, maybe not the accuracy, but he's going to have a more talented team than he has ever had around him. I'm sure the coaching staff there is excited to work with him. He's a really good kid. Remember that interview that he was talking about? He was trying to plead his professor so he could get an extension. So relatable. But, you know, when I ask for an extension, it's not because I just beat Clemson on the road by 3 touchdowns, but really good player. Really, really good player. I'm excited to see him. What about you?
Yeah, to me, I mean, he went in the portal, and this was kind of, even before he was in the portal, it was, oh, Leonard's going to Notre Dame, which is like tampering galore, red flags, sirens going on. They violated something. But you know what? That's what 2023 is right now. 2023, 2024. Yeah, we've been sitting on this one for a while, kind of waiting for him to pop. And obviously, with all the stuff that happened with bowl season and some of the portal stuff, we're finally getting to it here. This is massive for Notre Dame. Obviously, to bring a guy like CJ Carr from the high school ranks to replace maybe the long-term future of that quarterback room, but Riley Leonard's a guy that has a couple years of eligibility, very experienced guy, played in the ACC, well coached, dynamic athlete, good arm, accurate at times. You mentioned a little bit, not quite this year, but last year, and at times he flashed that accuracy and that ball. Especially when he was healthy, he gutted out some games. Florida State comes to mind where he was playing on half a leg, and obviously against Notre Dame, right? Early in the year, this is when he got hurt. But obviously, yeah, to me, this is perfect marriage for both sides, right? This is about as good as you can get for Notre Dame. There weren't a ton of elite options at quarterback in the portal. right? You talk about Cam Ward, maybe a couple others, but Riley Leonard's probably about as good as can get there. And if you believe in your offensive staff and you believe in your development, you can get this guy some good coaching and some good, footwork and technique. He can have a really, really good year. And they're kind of overhauling that wide receiver room, right? They're kind of overhauling that tight end room.
Yeah.
And it could be a really, really dynamic offense for Notre Dame, in which a guy like Riley Leonard could really thrive in.
Of course, you lose Joe Alt on your offensive line, your absolute anchor, easily one of the best prospects in the draft this upcoming April. There's just plenty of talent though. There's still plenty of talent there, and he's gonna have more weapons than Sam Hartman did. Sure, Chris Tyree left to go to Virginia, and uh
Holden stays the tight end is going to
Holden's
Tennessee.
Holden stays at
Rico
least.
Flores, Merriweather, Braylon James. Those are all young wide receivers, so and
But
not
guess
super
what?
productive guys.
You bring in Chris Mitchell from FIU. You bring in Bo Collins from Clemson. You keep Jaden Greathouse. You still got a really good stable of running backs. So I'm a I'm gonna say that this is a good spot for him to land. He's in a really good situation. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I hope he stays healthy, and I hope he balls out this year. Just don't ball out week one. All right. Let's uh let's keep it cool in College Station. Okay, kid. Let's talk about DJU, formerly Clemson player and Oregon State player, headed over to Florida State, where Mike Norvell is trying to tape something together. And you know what? Mike Norvell's prayers were answered when Nick Saban retired, and all those boys are starting to go over to Florida State. Massive, massive. And bringing in a guy like DJU is part of the reason why you're able to get a guy like Malik Benson, right? Malik Benson went to FSU, right?
Yeah, Malik Benson and Roydell Williams, both from the offense side of the ball, coming over from Bama.
So DJU is not a bad quarterback. Whatever you want to believe, right? Yeah, maybe he's not an NFL quarterback. Maybe he's not a top 10 quarterback, but he's a pretty good quarterback. So I think Florida State's going to enjoy having him for just 1 year where they get their guy in there. We'll see how that all works out. What's that? It's not Grunkenmeyer, right? Is it? Who's
Yeah,
the
it's Luke Grunkenmeyer.
Ethan Grunkenmeyer?
Ethan, thank you.
Was that who's the guy that's going to Penn State that Minnesota was in on for a while?
Ethan Grunkenmeyer.
That was Ethan Grunkenmeyer. Gosh,
Yeah.
who was the FSU guy? Whatever. You can look that up while I keep talking. He did okay at Oregon State, I think.
Luke Kromenhoek. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Luke
yes.
Kromenhoek.
And you know what?
Stud from
He is
Benedict
really
Military
good.
School.
I've heard really good things about him. He was good at Elite Eight. He'll be all right. So let him sit a year. Give DJ a chance to win a couple ball games for Florida State. Are they going to win 10 games? I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah,
But
my notes on him. Oh, sorry, real quick. Yeah, my
no, it's
notes
all
on him
you.
is we know who he is, right? We've seen a lot of DJU at college level. We saw him back in high school as well at St. John Bosco, right? High floor guy, played a lot of football, a lot of experience. That's good. He's a really good bridge quarterback, and also maybe Mike Norvell, fixes one thing here with him and he improves a little bit. Right? Is he gonna lead him to national championship? I don't know. But I also think like this had the possibility of being a really, really down year for Florida State. With the quarterback situation, nobody on that roster was ready to play right now. Right? DJU comes in, like you said, can be a bridge quarterback to Kronkenmeyer, to whoever else is there for Florida State. And also get some guys to transfer in on the offensive side of the ball. Malik Benson, Jalen Hall, a guy from LSU. I'm sorry, Jalen Brown, a guy from LSU that's really highly rated guy a year ago in the portal. 5'11" guy from Miami that you let go in the beginning in high school recruiting. He can come back and pair up with DJU. Yeah, this is nice for Florida State. Right? They're trying to salvage, a really good year and obviously some portal exits, some NFL exits, and
A
and,
lot
and
of
really
them.
hit. Yes, yes. This was a really talented team, and it kind of got decimated. And they're taping it all together. Mike Novell stayed at Florida State, got an extension, and we'll see what DJU can do there. I think this is a really nice pickup. I don't think it gets me super excited. I don't think it makes them immediate ACC championship favorites, right? I'm not going to just pencil them in as the winner of the ACC in the bid to the playoffs, but it helps you compete with Miami, Clemson, NC State, and teams like that.
Let's talk KJ Jefferson, Arkansas quarterback, large mammoth of a human being. Could he have gone to a better spot than UCF with Gus Malzahn? I don't know that he could have.
No, and we saw what he did with John Rice Plumlee, and we've seen what he's done with like running quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks. He has thrived on them in that
Timmy
system.
McLean.
Yeah, yeah, and now KJ Jefferson's a little bit different body build than Nick Marshall and some of these guys that have been there where they're just speedsters and they run a 4-4, blah, 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 or they play, outfield for you in baseball season like John Rice Plumlee did. But KJ Jefferson, we know what he can do in the SEC when healthy, right? We've seen really good things from him. At times, is he inaccurate? At times, he put the ball in harm's way, sure. But also, he's a really special player. You see how hard it is to tackle him, how hard it is to sack him. And at the goal line, 4th and 1, he gives you so many options to do things and just extend drives and get 6 instead of 3 for you there. And that's such a big difference in some of these ball games, especially in an uber competitive Big 12. Right? UCF was tied to a bunch of different quarterbacks in the portal, and they got a really good one in KJ Jefferson.
Absolutely. I think Gus Malzahn was licking his chops when he saw him enter the portal. This is a huge get for UCF. I get Timmy McLean is a very polarizing player, I think, among UCF fans. I think you've seen him do really well, and I think you've also seen him not do so well, aka blowing leads against Baylor. But KJ Jefferson's a man. He is a man. You can see him make plays like that very few quarterbacks make, in the sense where he's so hard to bring down. He's so hard to bring down. And that's an advantage. That's an advantage. You make a guy miss in that pocket, and all of a sudden that pocket opens up entirely, and you can make a throw downfield or you can scramble, take off. It opens things up big time. I think this, I don't know if it adds like 3 wins, but I think this adds wins. Like this is a plus quarterback over John Rice Plumlee, I think.
Yes, yes.
I know he
And
didn't have a great
also,
season this year, but like they had no running game, they had no offensive line. The tight end got hurt pretty early in the season. Their stud Luke Haas. It was it was a tough season for Arkansas and their fans, but it was not because of KJ Jefferson. I'll tell you that.
no, and also people didn't love their OC and whatnot and everything happened there. So yeah, we'll see. Um, with Jefferson and UCF, I mean, they're entering the Big 12, right? Which is just about as wide open as any conference there is every year. And their tough out of conference schedule is at Florida. And guess what, UCF? Like you're in an era right now where you can legitimately beat Florida in their place. Like that's how good Malzahn has you humming right now. That's how down Florida is right now. Now we'll see. A lot can happen, in 6 months, 8 months when you have to go play them. But you have a pretty manageable Big 12 schedule, right? You get Utah, you get Colorado, at TCU, at Iowa State. We'll see what Arizona is. We'll see how Cincinnati rebounds. We'll see what Neil Brown does after a little success at West Virginia. But the door's open for you. And KJ Jefferson, I think he sees that. I think he sees a spot where he can be developed and make a lot of money, right, with UCS program. And then also, put up crazy, crazy stats. And I think college fantasy football players, I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, they're probably pretty happy with this marriage, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd agree. There's some quarterbacks out there I think that are better, but looking at a guy with really high upside could be KJ Jefferson, especially best ball leagues. I think people are gonna be licking their chops for KJ Jefferson. Let's talk about Quincy Wiggins. Who is Quincy Wiggins? Well, I don't know that you've heard about him unless you are an LSU fan, because he hasn't gotten to play a lot in his entire career, but he's 6'6", 265. He was a former top 100 player. Like he's top 50 player, I think, in 24/7 as an edge player, defensive end. He's got all the talent in the world. And here's the other thing about Quincy Wiggins, other than he's transferred from LSU to Colorado. I don't believe he started playing football until he was like freshman or sophomore in high school. So if you really want to look at things, and he's still got 3 years of eligibility left, I believe. You're kind of looking at like piece of clay, like can you mold
Hmm.
this into something special? I think Quincy Wiggins wanted the chance to prove his skills. He wasn't getting a ton of playing time at LSU, which to me is surprising because I think they struggled at the edge position this year. He's got a 7 foot wingspan, basketball player in high school. He originally was going to play basketball. Then he started playing football, and all of a sudden, he's top 100 player. You're like, all right, well, let me go play football. So I like him a
Yeah, it's
lot. Especially important for Colorado because they need to build in the trenches.
yes. And to add a body like this, like Savell Smalls was added last year, former 5-star guy, everyone knows about him. Didn't quite work out at college yet. Not a ton. We'll see what happens there. I still believe in him, and he still has time to figure it out. But to add a body with the wingspan, with the length, the bend athleticism that he has, you don't see that all the time in Colorado. And that's why this is such a big get for you. Will it pan out in year one? I'm not too sure. We'll see. He has a lot of development to be done, but also this will be year three, right? And that's a lot of times that big jump comes from these super raw, lanky guys in year three. And obviously, Colorado is ecstatic to have him coming in for you guys. He adds to a portal class that's pretty darn good. You got 22 guys coming in, bunch of receivers, bunch of O linemen, and a couple edges on the D linemen as well. And that's exciting. And that's exciting time for Colorado as they're trying to make a push coming into the new Big 12. But who knows what Deion's future there is. But at the same time, like he's bringing up some good talent, right? Samuel Okonlola, we talked about him. We talked about a bunch of different wide receivers they've hit on. Anquan Barnes coming over from Bama. You got Nikhil Webb Walker from New Mexico State. Just talked about them. So yeah, we will see. But I do think this is one that gets you pretty excited for Colorado because of the upside, because of the potential NFL upside and all that good stuff that comes with this freaky athlete kind of guy, you know?
I agree. I agree. So we'll see how it works out. I think he'll do well there. I think he'll do well there. I'm not gonna say Colorado's gonna win X amount of games more with him on the roster or because of him on the roster. This is a good get. It's good. He's Baton Rouge native too, so pull him out of home is kind of a big deal.
Hmm.
Let's talk about Jeremiah Hunter. As it currently stands, he's committed to Washington. Does that change? Am I speculating things? Maybe a little bit. If he does stay at Washington, I still think he's in a good spot, right? Jed Fish over there, he's got a good staff he's bringing in. He's a good coach on his own. Washington's a good place to be. You're playing in the Big Ten, yada, yada, yada. You got Roma Dunze and Polk leaving, so you're going to have plenty of room. I mean, Jeremiah Hunter's really good. Was he 6'3", 200 pounds? Was really good. I got stats right here. He was 63 receptions, 731 yards, 7 touchdowns. Led the team in all of those stats. So it's 63 receptions. The next closest player in receptions at 39. So he's a high pointer, can catch in traffic. He's a deep threat. I think anywhere he would have went, he would have been very successful. He's currently committed to Washington. I think it's a good spot. Do you see him possibly making a move somewhere else after Kalen
I
DeBoer?
For Washington State's sake, I hope, or Washington's sake, I hope not, because I am super high on him. We talked about him when we did Cal early in the year. I bet on him in prize picks a couple times. He was awesome. He is a really, really talented player for them over in Cal. It sucks that they lost him. Does he go back to Cal? I doubt it. That's kind of tough to do that. Does he go over to Bama? I think Bama would love to add him to that wide receiver room right now that has had a couple of big time losses, but also like Washington in its own right. And Jed Fish need him badly too. You mentioned that the big three with Polk, Odunze, and McMillan, but also Jeremy Bernard is in the portal as well, another one of their top guys. So there's a lot of catches to be had there at Washington. They get a good quarterback to come over there and join Jeremiah Hunter. Watch out for him this year. You know, we saw what a guy like McMillan did at Arizona with Jed Fish, and the numbers he put up, the numbers that Dorian Singer put up a year ago. Jeremiah Hunter as the number one wide receiver at Washington in Jed Fish's offense could do awesome things, and I think it could be beneficial for him to stay there.
I agree with that. I hope he stays. I hope he stays. I think Washington fans, they need a win. They need a win.
They
Actually, the
need
win
a
came with
win.
Jed Fish. Jed Fish is a win. All right, that's a win. You lose
Mhm.
Kalen DeBoer and you get Jed Fish. That's really good. So I'm all over that. Yeah, like you said, this is a really good football player. He dominated. Yeah, sure, he didn't have 1,000 yards, right? But since when is like just because a receiver doesn't have 1,000 yards doesn't mean he's very good, very talented, right? I mean, there's a difference between having Michael Penix throwing you the ball and Fernando Mendoza throwing you the ball, right?
Mhm.
So I'm all over this. I wish him well. I think he's gonna be awesome. Let's talk about Chip Trayanum, former linebacker, converted running back at Ohio State, transferring to Kentucky, where transfer running backs seem to work out a little bit. So I like Chip Trayanum a lot. I remember watching him the spring game this past spring. If you remember, Mine Williams and Travion Henderson were out in the spring game. People remember, and Chip Trayanum, he was like that third guy. And he did really well in that situation. Yeah, I think he had like the really long touchdown along the sideline that you kind of get to showcase his speed, and he's got really nice strength. I don't know about like laterally, like how quick he is, but he's got some serious toughness to him. Some serious toughness to him. And I think he absolutely adds a lot to this Kentucky running back room. I'm excited for him. I think he can do well. Because again, is he as talented as Ray Davis? I don't know. I don't know. But he converted from linebacker and was competing in a running back room at Ohio State that was loaded. There was a lot of injuries there that helped him do that, get those opportunities, but it was loaded. So I I personally like Chip Trayanum here. I think it's a good spot. What about you?
Well, I think anyone that can add a guy like Chip Trayanum is going to take him. I mean, 5'11", 233. You mentioned how physical he runs. He's a bruiser to bring down. You know you're going to feel that the next day trying to meet him in the A gap there. And obviously, like a guy with as high a floor that he has and the short yardage toughness runs that he can do, that has immense value for any team out there. Would love to have him. Now, is he a guy that you want to get 300 carries a year, 200 carries a year, as your feature back? I don't quite know. I don't think he has the upside quite as Ray Davis did, or a guy like Benny Snell or Chris Rodriguez, et cetera, at Kentucky that they've had this string of success at running back position. But also, he's a damn good runner. And also like every time he runs the ball, he runs hard. And that there is value to that and wearing teams down. And also just the experience that brings him. He's from Akron, Ohio. He's an Ohio State guy. The state of Ohio guy that goes just south to Kentucky. It's a good ad for them in the area of need for sure. And Mark Stoops does great in the portal. Now maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's better than Ray Davis. Maybe he's just as good as he is as Ray Davis was. So yeah, to me, this makes a lot of sense. Not a lot of carries to be had in that Ohio State backfield with Trey Henderson coming back and with the addition, obviously, um, of wow, how am I blanking on his name? The Ole Miss running back coming over, Quinshon Judkins. I'm sorry
Yep,
about that,
there you go.
but yeah, trying them. It's a good fit for Kentucky, and obviously a good ad for any coaching staff there.
Let's talk about Robert Lewis. Seems like there was a time last June where we were talking about another particular Georgia State running or wide receiver that transferred to a Power Five school, and he happened to do pretty good, if you recall. So I will say I like Robert Lewis. I don't know if I love him as much as I love Jamari Thrash, but I like Robert Lewis a lot. He's not the biggest guy, 5'11", 175, but he was productive. 70 for 877, 7 tutters, 12.5 yards per catch. I mean, I like him a lot. I like him a lot. And I think Auburn is definitely a place to go with Hugh Freeze if you want to be coached up as a wide receiver. He's coached some pretty good wide receivers over the day, and he's got a heck of a wide receiver room that's going to be there next year. So Robert Lewis will have to compete for reps for sure. I'm confident in him. Like he could win out that wide receiver one spot, wide receiver two spot.
Well, for sure. And Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson, the guys you're talking about, both freshmen, but also those guys are both 6'3", right? Those guys, and obviously Cam Coleman's super really good. Perry Thompson as well. I don't know how polished they are coming right out of high school. I think Robert Lewis is very polished. He can run all the routes you need. And I think maybe working from the slot, he's a smaller guy at 5'11", right, 5'10" maybe. And he was in an offense that doesn't really feature wide receivers like Auburn will. Because he ran the ball a lot with Marcus Carroll and Granger there at quarterback. I do think this is a nice pickup for Auburn. You mentioned Jamar Thrash last year had a ton of success going up a level to be at Louisville. I think Robert Lewis has similar amounts of success at Auburn as well. This is awesome. He's third team All Sun Belt. He had 200 yards against Charlotte. That's pretty darn impressive. And I think it's a really nice fit. Why you have two 6'3" guys, 2'6'3" freshmen that you're coming in to lead that wide receiver room, but you insert a guy here with a lot of experience and Robert Lewis to come in and teach him how to be wide receivers at the college level and also like be really productive in his own right. This is a great fit for both sides.
Yeah, the question is, who is going to be throwing him the football?
Oh, don't even get Auburn fans started on that, right? Yeah,
Now, could it be Will Rogers?
there's some thought there, right? That Will Rogers, a couple other guys in the portal. I don't know. You've seen enough of Will Rogers as Hugh Freeze has, right? You've been in the SEC, you've been around the Mississippi State program, like you know
He can make a
exactly who Will
throw.
Rogers is. He's better than Peyton Thorne. There's no doubt about it. He is significantly better than Peyton Thorne. And I think in an offense like Hugh Freeze, it'd be interesting. Now, Hugh Freeze likes to run the quarterback just a little bit. I don't know how well Will Rogers does that.
Yeah, but you have your Peyton Thorne packages, you have your Will Rogers packages, like
Yeah, I don't know.
and no longer do you have Robbie Ashford though. He's gone, he's out of there. But I like Robert Lewis a lot. I think it's a really good spot for him. All right, well we'll leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Transfer Portal and Coaching Carousel. We appreciate you guys as always. Make sure if you like the content, like the video, right? And make sure you consider subscribing. Consider subscribing. And if you're listening on Spotify, please, if you will, give us a 5-star review if you really like the content. And of course, give us a follow. Keep tuning in. We're going to have more of this, more coaches to get to, more players to get to, conference recaps, more coaching drafts. I don't know. All this stuff. You're just going to have to stay tuned to check us out. You're going to have to stay tuned. CD, you got anything?
Who doesn't want college football all year round, right? It is a 12-month sport. Everyone who knows college football knows that. It's not just recruiting in the offseason. We got a lot to talk about. And we hope you guys are going to join us for that. Like you said, like and subscribe. And we'll continue to push out the best videos we can.
Alrighty. And we will see you in the next one.